So we're continuing our series, my series. Y'all are indulging me, I know, with the third lesson in the introduction of science of mind in the textbook. The first one, we talked about the thing itself and began to explore this idea of mind and what mind is and how it works. We discovered that there were, I know we know this, but there are two aspects of mind. There's a conscious mind and there's a subjective mind. And they are very, very different, yet they are all part of the same thing. And that there's this exchange between the conscious and the subjective in a number of ways. And really the whole introduction, the whole science of mind is based on this premise. That the thing that we as a species have come to call a deity, God, really is about mind. And that's the highest expression of life, the highest understanding of life, is that as we think, we create our lives. So we looked at that. And I'm already boring people, I can see, with some yawns out there. So I'll continue on. Last week we did how it works. And I chose to talk about how mind filters work and how we have this thing in our subjective that holds ideas as so and continues to create them over and over again until we change those filters and change our basic beliefs. And when we do, our lives change. And that really the whole idea of what we can do with mind dwells in that idea that it is stable and stays the same way until we change it, based on our own thoughts and our own beliefs. And then number 3 is what it does. Well, interestingly, in this discussion of what it does, Holmes starts off by telling you what it doesn't do. And I think it's really important to understand what it doesn't do, because it isn't like there's this way that most people on the planet imagine a supreme being, is that somehow it's influencing us. Even people in this movement often think that they're getting all this information from the universe that's giving them direction and such. But Holmes says very clearly in the 3rd chapter of his book that that's not how it works. That we really don't have a God that's pushing us in one direction or keeping us from going in another direction. That we have absolute volition in our life. We get to say where we go. We get to say what happens in our lives. The trick is that many of the concepts that we've engaged in mind keep bringing us stuff that we say we don't want. And so this is something to understand, is this brilliant subjective mind is just waiting for us to have a thought. Actually, we're having thoughts all the time, so we're constantly influencing it, but it does nothing on its own. It has no initiative of its own. It only works through us. So that when we have a thought that something is so, when we believe that something is so, boom, it shows up in our lives. And the more clear we are about that, the better it works. Now, Holmes' statement on this goes something like this. Subjective mind can give us only what we can accept. Now, it may have all knowledge, all knowing of anything that has ever happened in the entire universe. It's in mind. Mind never forgets. But then mind doesn't give it back until we want it. So the idea here is that our work, as far as receiving from this subjective mind, is to accept it and what it's able to do. It is the creative force of the universe. We are the initiator of that creative force. It will not do it without us thinking it. And I'm not just saying thinking it because we want it, thinking it at all. Thinking it in any way, shape, or form. When we do that, we're going to get something that's going to pop into our experience. So that when we're judgmental of someone, we're going to have more opportunities to be in judgment. And when we're angry about something, we're going to find a lot more things to be angry about, because that's how it works. That's what it's doing. Now, there was a quote that I put up that you all saw when you first came in this morning, and I want to bring it back because I think it really speaks to this in a powerful way. We're in this teaching, so we learn these things, and does that make life easier? Not necessarily. Holmes says trained thought is far more powerful than untrained. And the one who gives conscious power to his thought should be more careful than he think about what he thinks, careful what he thinks, than the one who does not. Meaning that people that are not in this teaching, that don't have these ideas, they have no idea that what they're thinking is creating stuff in their lives. But we do. We know that there's a power going on here. The more power one gives to his thought, the more completely he believes that his thought has power, the more power it will have. Wow. And I found that absolutely to be true in my life. Now, that doesn't mean that when I have this casual thought that pops off the top of my head, that that's not creative, that that doesn't have an influence on what I experience. It does. But when I get absolutely clear, when I know the truth of my being, and when I say, and I often say this in my treatments, my word is the word of God. That's putting power in my thought. That's influencing it. And when subjective mind gets this idea that these words being spoken and thought are the words and thoughts of God, well, then they have to show up. The trick is, though, that because we have this knowledge, because we have this awareness that that's how it works, we can get caught up in making things happen that we really didn't want to happen. Now, everybody's doing that, but they don't see it. And what I've come to in my life is that when something happens and I'm not pleased with that thing that's happening, my first question to me, okay, what did you think that would have brought this into your life? Not in a blaming way, because that doesn't help. To make ourselves wrong for our thoughts is ridiculous. That just makes the problem worse. But to say, what did I think? What is it in my consciousness that's doing that? And you can get lost there, so I'm not really suggesting we do this obsessively. But what I've found is when I do that and then I'm open to what it is, I can see it. And I go, oh, okay, well, that's not true for me anymore. I don't want to live with that. This is what's true. And I restate it, and I re-stimulate my thinking in a way that brings me the thing that I'm more pleased with than the thing that I'm not. Now, there's some limitations to this, not in mind, because mind has no limits. But because we are the ones with limits, it's helpful to us to not start thinking that we know everything about everybody else, because it's their thinking that's influencing what they're experiencing, and they have an absolute right to their experience, whether we like it or not. Somebody actually called me this week and said that they were named the executor in the will of someone who had just passed. And would I please treat that all the people in that family calm down and be all right with everything that's happening? And I laughed, and I texted her back and said, I can't do that. Because they have a right to their thoughts. They can do all of that. They can be as upset as they want. They can be as greedy as they want. They can do whatever they want. What I can know for you is that you're rising above all that. And I got a reply, okay. And I also had to share with her the unseemly thought that she's not an executor. She's a woman, therefore, in our culture, that's called an executrix. I know, isn't that silly? But that's the word, and if you hang around a lawyer, they'll tell you. So, let's go ahead and go beyond that. What it does, that's what we're working on, what it does. Holmes writes, and I think that's coming up here, yes, the arrogant have not perceived the simplicity of faith, but the pure of heart see God. That's a sweet thought. And I'm not telling you that Ernest is wrong in any way, but I think it can be misconceived that somehow only people that are really goody two-shoes can know God. And that's not true. What's important about that statement is the beginning of it. If we think that we have to have everything always worked out completely before we can have the life we've come to live, that's arrogant. You know, we don't have to have it all figured out. We don't have to know everything. What we have to do And I think what he's saying by being pure in heart is that he's suggesting that we not have that pressure on ourselves, that we not think that we have to have it all worked out, that we don't think that we have to know everything to make it work, that all we have to do is be open to the possibility of life and bring our thoughts in a direction that are pure, that allow us to be the beings we've come to be. So a powerful statement, but to me it required a little bit of looking at it to see where we were going to go with that. So what I want you to do right now is turn and look at someone. I know we got this thing of social distancing. Some of you are close together and you can do this. But somebody in the room, find their eyes and just experience them. And if you don't have anybody, you can look at me. I've got eyes. Just experience for a moment that those eyes are a window to the presence of the divine. And the eyes they're looking at, Roger, look at her. There you go. There you go. And those eyes looking back at you, what they're seeing is the presence of the divine. That's what's going on all the time. So imagine for a moment now a flower with a stem, with petals, with color. Imagine that flower and understand that that flower cannot exist outside of the presence of the divine. It's impossible. Well, nothing exists outside of it, but if you look at that, there's an intelligence in that flower for it to have that shape, for it to have that fragrance, for it to actually be able to do what it can do, and that is create more plants that would have flowers like it. That's the beauty of life. It's elegant. It's exceptional. And it's all this presence. It all dwells in the mind of the divine. It was conceived through the mind of the divine. So were you. At least your body was. I frankly don't think that who you are was ever conceived. It has existed forever and will exist forever. That it transcends time and space. But we play this game of being in bodies on planet Earth. I don't think we're in our bodies, but I think we have this as our vehicle for being in a three-dimensional world. And it kind of works for us. If we'll let it, if we'll not make it a problem, if we'll not focus on things that we say aren't working very well, and we do focus on things that are working, I think we're going to get a very different take on how the world works. And how powerful that is to be able to do that, to be able to work from that place. So it's important to understand, again, that subjective mind, this all-knowing, all-being creative force of the universe, does not initiate anything. That it's through conscious mind that things are initiated. And this gets us, again, back on course, talking about what it does. So we have a thought, or we have an existing belief. Either of them do the same thing. They impress upon the subjective mind the idea that that's what's going to be created into our lives. So I would ask you, do you know how that works? Because I don't. I don't think anybody knows how it works. But Holmes makes a suggestion, and I have extrapolated from his suggestion the idea of plastic extrusion. You all are familiar with plastic extrusion, right? Let me explain what I'm talking about. So what happens is that a company that does plastic extrusion buys these big bags of plastic pellets, and they put them into a machine that melts them down into a liquid. And then they force it into a mold. And in that mold, there's some form to it for some purpose. And so what happens is that hot plastic goes in there. It cools down very quickly. They take the mold off. And what comes out is a thing made of plastic that is the exact opposite of what the mold was. And now you've got this object. Now the thing about those plastic pellets is they don't care what shape they're in. The only thing that they're working on as a substance is being plastic. They know how to be plastic, and that works. But this idea of taking some form, it's just what it took, and it doesn't care. And the same thing is true in the creative process. in what it does is that somehow everything is made of energy. And when we have a thought about something, about a person or a condition or a thing, an object, whatever, we're actually creating a mold. We provide the mold with that idea. And that's why I always tell people when they're doing treatment work, don't just look at something two-dimensionally. Move around it. See the backside of it. See the bottom and the top of it. What is it that you're looking at? And really create this three-dimensional image in your mind, because that's what you're giving to subjective mind. And out of that, subjective mind takes energy, which doesn't care what form it's in, and suddenly this thing is in your life. This person, this condition, whatever it is suddenly in your life. How did it show up? Well, that's none of your business. Mine either. It just shows up. It shows up by whatever means it's going to. And when we start trying to micromanage that, we get in the way. So don't try to micromanage it. The work that we do, being the metaphysicians that we are, is to have that image of what it is that we desire in our lives. Not focusing on the desire of it, because the desire can actually get in the way. Because desire is a concept too, and that can go into subjective mind. And what comes out of it, when we have a great desire and we're focused on the desire, is we get to desire more. But we don't necessarily get the thing that we are calling forth in our lives. We do that by envisioning that thing, that situation, that person, however it is we want to do it. We do it in a way that it shows up in our lives. And it's frankly pretty much up to the subjective mind as to how that looks and how it works. Now, the one thing in the third chapter that Dr. Holmes really brings forward is to avoid doing something else, and it's called hoping. Do not hope that this works out. He actually refers in the book to working with practitioners who do this lovely treatment and end it by saying, and I hope this works out. No, don't hope. And he's not like down on the idea of hope. He says hope's better than despair. But hope will not, he called it a compromise. When we hope that something comes, we're doing a conscious compromise with subjective mind. We're saying, this is what I'd like, but let's see what happens. No, we claim in an absolute clarity that this is so in my life. And then we do, as Emerson said, we get our bloated nothingness out of the way. Because we do not have to micromanage it. We do not have to decide how it's going to be in every sense of it. Simply knowing that it is. And when it shows up, then it's our opportunity to explore it and experience it. It's sort of like opening gifts on Christmas morning when you were a kid. You got through the box of the paper and the box and the stuffing, and you got to the thing that you got. And now you want to have a relationship with it. And that's what you want to do here too. So if something shows up and it's not quite what you were thinking you'd like, all you have to do is recreate the image that you do want and allow it to morph into that. It's amazing how much power we have to create our lives. And the only limitation is our thinking. The only thing that holds us back is our inability to let it blossom forth in our lives. But when it does, it works. This is what it does. And to me, having that information gives us something wonderful. I'm moving for a second here because I want to read you the very last paragraph that he writes in chapter 3. It's on page 50 if anyone cares to check it out. It goes like this. When we think, something happens to thought. The field through which thought operates is infinite. There is no reason to doubt it. No matter how it is approached, to thought there can be no limit. So we will say that it is the nature of being to react in this way. Here and now, we are surrounded by and immersed in an infinite good. How much of this infinite good is ours? All of it. And how much of it may we have to use? As much as we can embody. So embody the presence, embody the knowing Know that you are the divine right here, right now, and that you make your life happen, just like I do, just like we all do. And that's our third lesson from the Science of Mind text. I love you very much. Thank you.